murder mystery tonight on the Bolivar Peninsula.
How the women were killed remains a mystery. Both were African American and homosexual. Many believe the women were targeted because of their sexual orientation.
Zaniah Jackson, a little girl from Houston, Texas. That morning, she was sitting quietly in the backseat of her mother's car, seatbelt strapped tight, when she heard a loud bang, a sound that would haunt her forever. When she stepped out of the car, she didn't see her mother Crystal smiling and coming back to drive her to school. She saw blood. She saw chaos. She saw something no child should ever have to process. Her own grandfather standing over her mother and her mother's girlfriend, Britney Cosby. Later, their bodies would be found discarded behind a convenience store dumpster, dumped like garbage. But this wasn't some random attack. It was personal. It was brutal. And the truth of what happened that day would eventually come from the small, trembling voice of a child. The next morning, around 7:45 a.m., a delivery truck driver pulling up to the Fisherman's Cove convenience store on the Boulevard Peninsula in Galveston County stumbled on a sight so horrifying it stopped him in his tracks. Behind the store, next to a large green dumpster, were two women's bodies, one laying on her back and a single gunshot wound to the head. The other was face down, her head wrapped in a sheet, her neck broken from blunt force trauma, so severe, detectives later described it as overkill.
911, what's your emergency?
I have two dead people at the back of my store by my dumpster. My Budweiser man was here to drop off an order, and he walked to the dumpster to go dispose of some trash, and he came in and told me to call 911.
Investigators also found a strange piece of evidence, a white and green shutter spattered with blood, as though it had been torn off the side of the house. There were also tire marks in the dirt, showing a car had peeled away at high speed. Something about the scene struck detectives immediately. There wasn't nearly enough blood for this to be an actual murder site. Whoever did this killed the women somewhere else, transported them here, and dumped them, stacked one body on top of the other, as if they were nothing more than trash. The quiet fishing community of Boulevard was stunned. Brutal double homicides weren't exactly common on the peninsula, and almost right away, detectives knew this wasn't random. This was personal. To understand the heartbreak of this case, you have to know who these women were. Britney Cosby was a 24-year-old deeply connected to her family and especially close with her elderly grandmother, Annie Lee, who practically raised her. Britney was thoughtful, caring, and had just begun to settle into her adult life. Crystal Jackson, also 24, was a mother herself. Her daughter, little Zaniah, was the center of her world. Crystal was hardworking, balancing a night shift job as a security guard while raising her child. She was spirited, outspoken, and proud of the new independence she was building with Britney. Together, Britney and Crystal had been in a relationship for about 2 years. They had recently taken a big step, buying their first car together, a 2006 Kia Sorento. For them, that vehicle was a symbol of progress, of adulthood, of a shared future. But not everyone celebrated their love. Crystal's father, Reverend Ivan Jackson, a preacher with fire and brimstone views, made it clear he disapproved of his daughter's sexuality. He even admitted to detectives that he once told Crystal her lifestyle would take her out of this world. Those words would haunt him forever. Still, Britney and Crystal carried on. They built a life together, raised Zaniah with love, and dreamed of better days. But their happiness would be cut short in the most brutal way imaginable. When detectives began their investigation, they naturally turned to those closest to the victims. Crystal's father, Ivan, was one of the first questioned. His open disapproval of Crystal's relationship made him an immediate person of interest. But while his words were harsh and his beliefs outdated, investigators couldn't connect him directly to the murders. Attention then shifted to Britney's side of the family, especially her father, James Larry Cosby. When police first knocked on the door of his Houston home, it was Britney's great-grandmother, Annie Lee, who answered. She confirmed Britney had been missing. Soon after, James appeared. At first glance, he didn't seem distraught. He wasn't crying or asking frantic questions. He was calm, too calm. Detectives noticed, and when they showed him a photo of the shutter they'd found at the dump site, James' house suddenly became very interesting because those shutters, they matched the one on his own home. Within days, detectives were circling in. James Cosby was arrested on March 13, 2014, charged initially with 2 counts of tampering with evidence. His bail was set at $500,000, but behind the scenes, investigators suspected something far darker. The real breakthrough didn't come from forensic at first. It came from the small, nervous voice of a 6-year-old girl. Detectives sat down with Zaniah Jackson. At first, her story came out in fragments, the way kids sometimes talk. But as she spoke, detectives realized she was describing something incredible. She said she had been sitting in the car the morning her mother died, buckled in her seatbelt. She heard a loud bang, a gunshot. Then she peeked out. She saw her grandfather, James Cosby. She said she saw blood in his room, on the bed, and on the floor. She said words no child should ever have to say. He decided to kill my mother and his daughter. Her testimony was haunting in its simplicity. Children don't have the capacity to invent detailed crime stories, and detectives knew it. Zaniah had seen something real. Her account matched the growing suspicions that James Cosby wasn't just a grieving father, he was the killer. Detectives returned to the Cosby residence. This time, they weren't just looking around, they were searching. A caretaker told them the carpet had been unusually spotless, cleaned in a way it had never been before. This was suspicious enough. Then, beneath a pile of bricks, detectives found dried blood droplets. When they forced open the garage where James lived, the truth spilled out under the UV lights. Luminol lit up the space like fireworks. Blood splatter was everywhere, on the carpet, on the couch, even smeared across clothes. Throw rugs had been carefully placed as if to hide the stains. This wasn't just a messy room. This was a crime scene. The murders had happened here, inside the Cosby house, and James had been sleeping in that very room, surrounded by the blood of his very own daughter and her partner. From there, the evidence just piled up. The bloody fingerprints found on the surface near the dumpster matched James Cosby. The shutter stained with blood came directly from his house. The Kia Sorento Britney and Crystal had brought was found abandoned near Houston Strip Club. Inside the trunk, detectives discovered a bullet lodged in the luggage rack. Surveillance footage showed the SUV being driven not by Britney, not by Crystal, but by a man whose build clearly matched James. Piece by piece, the puzzle was coming together, and Zaniah's testimony, paired with the forensic trail, painted a damning picture. But why would a father murder his own daughter and her partner in such a savage way? Detectives uncovered a motive that was both petty and deeply personal. James had asked Annie Lee, the family matriarch, to co-sign a car for him. She refused, but she did co-sign the loan for Britney and Crystal. To James, that was a slap in the face. To make matters worse, Annie Lee has recently changed her will. Instead of leaving everything to James, she left it to Britney, the granddaughter who was actually taking care of her, for a man already resentful of his circumstances, living in a couch in his mother's home. This was the breaking point. Jealousy, anger, resentment, all of it boiled over into violence. In August 2016, James Cosby finally went to trial. Prosecutors presented over 300 pieces of evidence: the bloody fingerprint, the shutter, the abandoned Kia, the luminol-lit garage, and, most haunting of all, the testimony of 6-year-old Zaniah. In the courtroom, James showed little emotion. He never confessed. He never denied everything, even when confronted with overwhelming proof. But the jury wasn't fooled. On August 10th, 2016, they found him guilty of capital murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The case made headlines across Texas and beyond. News outlets zeroed in on the shocking betrayal, a father killing his own daughter and her partner. But it also sparked conversations about prejudice. Many in the LGBTQ community saw the murders as fueled not just by jealousy, but by deep-rooted disapproval of Britney and Crystal's relationship. Advocates argued the case highlighted the dangers LGBTQ people can face, not just from strangers, but from their own families. Vigils were held in Houston and across Texas. Candlelit services honored the two women. Their story became a rallying cry for tolerance and a warning about deadly consequences of unchecked hate. For Zaniah, the aftermath was devastating. She had lost her mother, the woman she loved most. She had seen her grandfather commit the crime, and she had been forced to relive it, retelling her story to detectives and later to the court. But despite all of that, she showed remarkable strength. She went to live with her grandparents, Ivan and Mary Jackson. Detective Kitchens, who had worked the case tirelessly and had become her protector, was named her godfather. As she grew older, Zaniah found her purpose. She spoke of wanting to become a lawyer, to help families like hers, to fight for justice the way others had fought for her mother. Even as a teenager, she spoke with a remarkable wisdom about healing and resilience. Her voice, once small and trembling in an interrogation room, had grown stronger. From tragedy, she had found a mission. This case wasn't solved by high-tech forensics alone, though those details matter. It wasn't cracked by a sudden confession, because James never gave one. It was solved because of a child, a little girl who spoke up when it mattered most. Her words revealed the darkest truth, that her own grandfather had murdered her mother and her mother's partner. It's a reminder that evil often hides in plain sight, that family doesn't always mean safety, and that sometimes the most innocent voices are the ones that bring justice. But one question lingers. Was this only about jealousy and inheritance? Or was it also about hate, about a father who couldn't accept who his daughter was and who she loved? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. And if this story shook you as much as it shook me, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, because stories like this deserve to be told, and victims like Britney and Crystal deserve to be remembered.